This is episode 10 with Igor Litvak and the Fear of Money. Welcome to Fear Less University, the podcast where we discuss, dissect, and examine some of life's greatest fears. My name is Coach Lane Lee, performance coach and fear psychology enthusiast, here to help you understand your greatest fears. Fear is my passion, curiosity is my nature, and understanding is the gift I seek to share with all who will listen. Because if we seek to understand more, we can learn to fear less. Welcome to another episode of Fear Less You. Each episode, I feature a new guest who lends their special brand of wisdom and expertise to help me unlock the mysteries of fear. What we discuss is not an exact science, but in all things, we seek understanding. Because it's not about being void of fear, but instead understanding more to fear itself less. I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. Wherever you're listening, be sure to like and share this episode if you find it helpful or entertaining. And be sure to turn on your notifications so you know exactly when a new episode drops. And as always, be sure to rate and review us wherever you find us. By doing so, you're helping our placement and ranking in search results. Help me touch the lives of millions of people around the world, helping them to understand more and in turn, fear less. I hope you guys are ready for a fun episode because today I'm talking with longtime family friend Igor Litvak. Igor is a math whiz, data analyst, fixed income trader, and financial expert by day. In his off hours, he's an all-around paleo fitness and wellness enthusiast, a topic we actually end up taking a quite extensive tangent on, but that's for a separate episode. It's funny because the morning of our interview, I was in the shower getting ready and I thought to myself, wait a minute. Igor is amazing at finances and math, but he's passionate about fitness and health. We should be talking about that. But yeah, so he'll be returning soon for another episode strictly about wellness, health, and fitness. But today we're talking about the fear of money. When it comes to his knowledge and wisdom as a financial expert, Igor is all too humble. But as someone who always sets out to be and give his best simply because he accepts nothing less from himself, 5 minutes with Igor and you'll quickly learn that his humility is just another asset to his personality and that he truly does know his stuff. We talk about why we as humans have such a hard time talking about money with our families, our spouses, our kids, and especially ourselves. We talk about how money is emotional and why it's important for you to understand that concept. We talk about 6 money myths that keep you in a place of fear when it comes to money. And finally, and this is the part you'll for sure want to stick around for, Igor drops 3 actionable steps you can take today to help you better understand your fears about money and how to outperform those fears. I am super excited about today's episode and the subject matter. If you struggle with a fear of money or money troubles in your life, your marriage, your relationship, your career, this is the episode for you, and I'm super excited to have Igor talking about it. So without further ado, I present to you Mr. Igor Litvak. Let's go! What's going on, guys? Coach Lane here, Fear Less University. I'm super excited today because not only is it my first in-person interview, but I've got my friend Igor Litvak. What's up, brother? What's up, I've always wanted to do that. Yeah.
Like now that you're in person. Yeah.
Now I'm in person. I finally get to actually shake hands with my guests. So yeah, dude. So Igor is here today to discuss the fear of money. And boy, do we have a show for you guys. So I hope you're ready. Grab your pens and pencils. It's going to be exciting, but let's jump right into it, dude.
Sure.
Yeah, tell us a little about who you are. Well, first, before we do that, I'll give people a little bit of a background. So Igor and I met through my wife. You are my wife's best friend. And you and I have now known each other for like 10 years, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So tell us a little bit about who you are and your financial experience.
So I was a math major in undergrad, and then I got a master's in financial analysis from the University of San Francisco. Go Dons. Woo.
Woo woo.
Woo woo. When I got out of school, I graduated my undergrad right in 2008, so December 2008, which arguably the worst time ever to find a job in finance.
Right.
And so I went straight into the master's. After that, worked in private equity for a little while, and then I worked at Thomson Reuters as like a data analyst, and then I got my first trading job, so trading fixed income, so bonds. I did that for around 5 years. And now I work for a fixed income trading platform. So it's basically like a software that's a marketplace where it hooks up buyers and sellers of bonds, but like on an institutional level. So like millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow. It's crazy.
Yeah. In terms of personal finance background, I feel like if you study it as much as I did, usually pretty decent at it.
Right.
Pick it up from everybody on the street talking, street like Wall Street talk, and it's like a different attitude when you work in finance.
Right.
Everybody just talks about it much more openly, and the exchange of information is a lot smoother and cleaner. There's a lot less ambiguity and less of like taboo around talking about money. Plenty of people will disagree, but the majority of guys in finance are there to make money. Like that's
right.
That's why I got into finance.
Yeah, that's the lure.
Yeah, like okay, I'm a math major. How am I going to turn this into money? That's the idea. Yeah.
How am I going to turn numbers into bigger numbers? And,
exactly. Multiplication.
How much of what we see? It's funny that you brought it up. How about how communication in that world is better, exchange of information is better about money, because I think that's the whole reason that we're doing this episode is because people have such poor communication skills with their family members, with their spouses, just in general, even with their, let's say, you have an accountant. That's probably the only time that you're actually being forced to discuss money openly in your everyday life. But just real quick for my own curiosity, like how much of the financial world in real life is what we see depicted in movies and television?
15%.
Oh, really?
All the stuff you see in the movies is a lot of flash, a lot of like, if you're watching a movie about trading, you're watching Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, and you're watching like Trading Places and all this stuff. You're seeing like a lot of the institutional sides, so a lot of the day-to-day, what's it like working on a desk, on a trading desk, or you're watching investment bankers. A lot of that is important, and a lot of that stuff, like when it's just coming to institutional information, that's 90%, 80% accurate. But when it comes to personal finance, you never see that in movies. All you ever see is potentially a family going bankrupt and losing their house. Like over the last 10 years has been the theme after the collapse. But
right.
That's all you really see. But you're never watching a movie where the hero goes through this journey where he or she has some doubt about their finances or loses their money, and then how do they shave down their debt? How do they rebalance their debt with like lower interest rates? How do they look at their spending, and then how do they come out of that hole, and then how do they eventually prosper? I mean, you never see that kind of thing. So people have no idea how that actually works.
Yeah.
And they always think that it's really complicated. But it's really quite easy.
Which I think only adds to the angst that people have about dealing with money, which only adds to their fear.
Yeah, I mean, people just don't talk about it. And that's the biggest problem is, they say the key to any relationship is communication. And
for sure.
people aren't communicating about it, period. Parents aren't communicating to their kids. Spouses aren't communicating with one another. I read this a while ago, like around 40%, something like that. Some ridiculous number.
Yeah.
40% of couples don't know what the other spouse makes, like per year.
Wow.
Which to me is just insane.
Yeah.
You're sharing a life together. You have kids together. You have like all these intimate factors in your lives together as a couple, and yet you don't know what the other person makes. So that's pretty wild. And also, like, especially when you do have kids and you're thinking about, helping my kid in the future, building up college savings, things like that. I mean, these are all conversations that need to happen, but they rarely do happen.
For sure.
Because it's this like culture of fear that you're growing up with. And, a little bit of it, and it's fear in like many different respects. Fear of it could be fear of being judged, right? So you're like, oh, you make 50 grand, I make 70 grand. That's it. I'm better than you. Or the fear of seeming uneducated, right? So somebody will say, oh, how many months of expenses do you have in your reserves? And you'll be like, what?
Right.
And then you'll be like, oh my God, like I didn't know that. Or like, what was your portfolio return last year? And you're just like, oh, I don't know. I have like a share of Apple stock or whatever. So it's just, people just are afraid of being uneducated.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, and this like bugs me to no end, is people are afraid of offending one another.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, like what if I make more money than he does? Or what if I make more money than she does? Like, am I going to offend them? And this always makes me think of the quote from Golda Meir: "Don't be humble, you're not that great."
Right.
Majority of the time, you're probably making the same amount of money, and even if you're not, like, who cares? Like,
Right.
It just doesn't matter.
Right. Wow, man.
That's a lot. Anyway, so.
No, that's great. And I want to take a quick second to apologize to the listeners. I know it's a little echoey in here. We're doing the best with what we're given. I had 2 mics set up. Only one is currently working. But we're getting it figured out. So I apologize if it's a little echoey in your speakers. We'll get that worked out for next time. But moving on, like, what interests you about the financial world? Like, I guess, from my perspective, is it more than just the lifestyle, but like, is there a deeper desire, maybe even a subconscious one, to help people understand money better?
I definitely love to do that for family and friends. Otherwise, I think of finance as a competition. So The reason why I'm in finance is because it's a very, I guess, basic and in some ways clean way of competing. Especially as a trader, how much money did you make this year? What was your return this year? So that's a very clean cut way of comparison across like a trading desk, for example. And then I also like it for I guess the purity of it, because it's a quantitative measure and less qualitative. So that's why I got into finance. The other side of it, I also got into it for the lifestyle.
Yeah.
I like having a comfortable lifestyle. I really enjoy fast cars. So that's why I began and got into this whole thing, was just to feed this addiction to cars.
Got you.
But then it slowly kind of turns into, well, how much can I make? How much can I attain? It's much like the richest guys in the world, the billionaires. They don't need any extra money to buy anything with it.
Right.
For them, it's a gain of just collecting. It's like a massive stamp collection.
Yeah.
Or at least I think. I don't know. I'm not a billionaire.
Well, you're definitely one of the most competitive people that I know, in a good way. I think it's a way that's always kind of low key like inspired me to say
Thanks,
it's all about my theme since last year, January of 2017, has been stick to the plan. And, you've known me over the years, and I felt personally kind of unfocused in my last venture. And with this, it's the exact opposite. It's like this hyper focus, and working with athletes, I can appreciate someone who looks at what they do as a healthy form of competition and always trying to better themselves. So I think it's a cool way of looking at it.
Yeah, it's money is a good way of comparing I guess it's hard to even say comparing people against one another because it's such a poor measurement. It's just the best that we have psychologically come up with to this point. Mm-hmm. And even saying the best is not 100% there. You know, so money's a good measurement when you don't have anything else to measure. It's kind of the idea. It's also universal yardstick, so that's helpful. Mm-hmm. But, I would think that it's much more important to be a really good father, for example. Right. So I don't have any kids yet, but, that will definitely, and again, that'll just be something that I'm going to compete in as well.
Oh, yeah,
that'll be another thing.
Yeah.
And
which will be really fun to see.
Yeah. It's loads of fun. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But it's sick in a way that people are always using money as a comparison. Yeah. And especially in America, it's all about how much you spend. Not how much you make. Mm-hmm. So it's almost not even that important how much you make. It's how much did you spend. Mm-hmm. What kind of car you have, what kind of house you have, jewelry, whatever. I mean, whatever it is. And so that kind of like, that almost makes the competition worse. It makes the competition less pure. Because then you're not so much competing for, how can I make more returns? It's competing in a way that it's kind of like what's going to be the most impressive thing, and that's like a lost game. Like that game will never be won by anybody. It's always like even though the Joneses, like whatever your typical analogy would be for that, but it's just you're always like, oh, okay, well I got the Ferrari 458, but then the Ferrari 488 just came out, and then it'll be the Ferrari whatever 515, and then so you're always like trying to chase down, and that shit is exhausting, and it's just I don't know.
I think this is a great point to bring up. There's an actual movie. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called The Joneses with Demi Moore and David Duchovny.
I've heard it. I've seen like the trailer.
You need to watch it because it's exactly. I don't want to give it away to anybody who's listening who hasn't seen it, but they're a seemingly perfect couple with two perfect kids, and they move into this neighborhood and kind of turn it on its head with all their like fancy, shiny new stuff. And again, not wanting to give away too much, but let's just say that the twist as to who they really are is an amazing commentary on consumer culture. Yeah. And it's you see that theme throughout the movie, that it's like, oh yeah, well, I went ahead and got this new car because Mr. Jones had it. Next thing you know, next day, Mr. Jones has the next newest car. And you're like, well, what the heck was all this for then? Like, this. So it really is a poor way of comparing ourselves and our achievements to one another. But historically, it seems to be the way that we've always done it as human beings. We've come up with monetary denominations and then judged each other based on who has more of those denominations. So.
It's a very primitive way.
It really is.
It's just we're just a bunch of savages, really, running around in skinny jeans, and blazers. Like at the end of the day, like this is the best that you have. Yeah. Like thousands of years of human evolution, and this is the best that we've come up with. Right. I don't know. It's shaky at best. So,
well, on this show, I have a central theme. Like a tagline, if you will. If we seek to understand more, we can learn to fear less. So to me, it seems that people are fearful of that which they do not fully understand. Like Seneca the Younger was a Stoic philosopher. Tim Ferriss mentions him a lot. But he once said that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Mm-hmm. And I believe that to be all the more true when it comes to fear and understanding. People have said for decades that people fear that which they do not understand. And this is what tends to fuel our distrust of things, other cultures, religions, ethnicities, and in today's case, money. Now, I know I've had a tumultuous past with money at best. I'm thankfully beginning to get a much better grasp on it and how I manage it poorly. But I know that there are many people listening who still feel that it's something to be feared. Like when we were having our pre-interview call, right off the bat, you brought up that statistic that you already mentioned, with the 40% of American spouses who don't know what their partners make. This caught my attention because I think in that moment, I felt like I had been exposed. Like 10 years, I've been with my wife for 10 years. Like we've been married 3, but this, we've lived together for a large portion of that time. And I know that this is something she's brought up many times, and I've tried to examine it myself. Like, why do I have this problem of communicating with her about money? Thinking back on my upbringing, money was never something I heard my parents discuss openly.
Right.
Or even in private. Like, I just never heard them talk about money. There was never a discussion about money in our house. Like, it was either the perception that my dad was having a great season or year, and we were just buying things and going on vacations left and right. And then on the flip side, things would get tight and we would be cutting back. But there was never a discussion in the family about the why or what was actually going on. So, I remember being told that it was impolite to discuss money with people, what you make or how much you paid for something. When it came to saving and setting money aside, my dad helped my brother, my younger brother. I remember when my brother got his first job, my dad was like, okay, you're going to partition your paycheck. And you're going to, this much, just pretend that you don't even have the full paycheck. You have this much to spend, and then all of this goes into like a dedicated, high interest savings account or something like that. Right. But it was never, as the eldest sibling, it was never something that was really emphasized. He mentioned it, like, you should do this.
Out, dude. You should be first in line. You're the eldest.
And, I was like, hey, Pop, like, what's going on? Like, so, and I know money is important to my dad, but I also know that, he's had his struggles with it over the years. He's, had his own businesses and stuff like that. And he's very well to do now, and I think he's better off now mentally thinking about it. But yeah, that was pretty much my experience growing up. And I know that, at least I feel, maybe I'm a little naive, but I feel that people listening may have had similar situations where they just didn't discuss it. So, why do you think that is? Why do you think that? Let's start with spouses. Why do you think that among spouses we don't talk about money, and why do you think that money isn't more regularly discussed in the family setting as well?
So I think it's just a social taboo. I think society has deemed it, like you said, impolite, and a lot of people think that way, and they don't want to be impolite, and so that's part of it. The other part is they don't want to be judged. They don't want to be compared, and they don't want to be seen as the loser. And in many ways, it's not the right way to look at it.
Right. Being
judged is nothing to be ashamed of. People are being judged all the time, all day, everywhere you go.
Yeah.
Like I always love those guys that get tattoos, only God can judge me.
Right.
That's not right.
Right.
Everybody's judging you at every moment.
And by getting that tattooed, you're inviting
and then you're inviting judgment as well. It's just everybody's being judged all the time. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
That's how we survive as a race.
Right.
Like that's, human beings have learned to judge their surroundings and figure things out as we go based off previous experiences. And so you're constantly, it's just like a supercomputer. Your brain is just like processing all this data all the time, judging all kinds of situations, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And so I think that because it's so ingrained in our minds from a young age that it's impolite, that people as they get older, they think that they're more mature, therefore they're going to do the most mature thing, which is to be polite. And so then they just never end up talking to anybody about money, and then at the end of the day they realize that they don't know anything about money.
Right.
They don't have anybody to talk to about it. They've never been taught anything, and then they're just on a boat in the middle of the ocean without an oar.
Right.
And so the best way to do this kind of thing that people need to do is to have smaller conversations first. Like a good conversation to have with somebody would be, hey, did you hear about this sale going on at Macy's? Like I got those shoes for like 15% off. And they'll be like, oh, really? Like, that's cool. I'll go pick that up as well. And then you can start thinking about, where else can I take advantage of like a sale or take advantage of a situation like that? And you start sharing those things. And as people get more comfortable, I would suggest starting with your spouse. As people get more comfortable with that kind of thing, and it's also important to remember to not look at that kind of like, hey, I was smart enough to see that 15% sale, so I got it and you didn't kind of thing. Right. You need to present it and communicate it. It's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying. So just say it in such a way like, oh, hey, I got this great deal. I want to share with you. Like I want you to know about it as well in case you wanted those same shoes so that you can partake in it. And then you take baby steps and then you say like, oh, hey, like how do you think about your investments for the future? Like, are you using your 401k? Are you doing IRA contributions? Are you doing those things every year? I am. Here's how I'm thinking about it. And then what are you doing with that IRA money? Is it in a CD? Are you managing it yourself by buying stocks and things like that? And eventually, hey, what's your portfolio looking like? And then eventually you'll just be like, this is how much I make. Here's my bank statement, kind of thing. So it's baby stepping your way there, but it's very important conversations to be having with, especially the loved ones in your life, and then also people that you look up to as a mentor. Yeah. Because people have all kinds of information that they're just not sharing. Yeah. Knowledge here is power more than anything.
Exactly. Is this the methodology you've employed in your personal life when talking to family and friends and those close to you about money?
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, my family was very open about money. We talked about it all the time as a kid growing up. When we came to America, I immigrated from Russia when I was 3. When we came here, we had $90 total across everybody. Wow. And then my parents opened several businesses throughout their lives. And then because of certain circumstances, things went south on the family. And so around the age of 18, my family went bankrupt. To the point where like the repo man was coming to take my mom's BMW. Wow. Yeah, this was a funny story. Segue.
Let's do it.
So my mom had this like the 7 Series, the big body BMW. Right. And so we couldn't make the payments on that car anymore. And so the repo man started coming around at night to like take my mom's car. So it was my job at the time to make sure that every night my mom's car was like hidden inside the garage. Wow. So the repo man couldn't take it. Right. And so we knew that it was the right thing to do to give it back. We just like, my mom needed a car. Yeah. And so eventually, like finally, after like a few months, I think, of this dance back and forth, I left the car outside and I left the repo man a note kind of like, hey, sorry about this. Like, if you want to knock on the door, I'll just give you the key. You don't have to like whatever shimmy the car to get in. I'm sure he had a key already or whatever, or he was afraid if he knocks on the door, he's gonna be a shotgun on the other end or something. Right. So I never got the knock on the door where the car was gone the next morning. So all these experiences. So it's kind of like we had nothing, then we had a lot, and then we had nothing again, and working way back up from zero. That really taught me that there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to be embarrassed of. Initially when the family went bankrupt, obviously we didn't want to tell anybody, but, you couldn't hide that kind of thing. Yeah. And nor did I want to. Hiding it makes it feel worse. You're like hiding the secret and it's just going to erupt. And there's no shame in it. I mean, businesses turn south, things go against you, and that's how it goes. And it's just, people need to feel empowered to speak about it. Sure. And when you speak about it, it'll actually lessen your own burden. So like you were saying, like your father had money troubles. It doesn't have to be trouble. Right. It doesn't have to be a problem if you're sharing it with your family and your loved ones. That's what they're there for. It's a support system. Use that support system.
And the interesting thing was it taught me other things, like other valuable lessons. But in regard to money and money management and like what happens if, I get into the same, scenario. I almost said trouble. It's just a matter of like, it's funny. It's how I coach. Actually, it's all about changing the internal dialogue or the words that we use. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Like, because, words, people say that, words are just words, but we have specific words for specific things for specific reasons to call, like you were saying, the brain is making thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of calculations per minute. And taking in all this information. So our brains are, learning to take shortcuts from the time we're born. And so words have they're the direct link to those shortcuts basically for your brain. So it's funny, I almost said money troubles, but yeah, him going through those things definitely taught me perseverance. It taught me never to give up. It taught me to believe in my own dreams and pursue my own path. But at the same time, let's say I get into similar situations financially, it would have been helpful to have those conversations as well, which it's not too late. We can still have those conversations, but at least now I'm learning how to kind of broach the subject with him. And I saw this quote or this, exchange last night that it was really cool. It was on, Tyler Harris's, Instagram page, and he was sharing a conversation that he had with, a group of guys that they, I think, recently met with, and they're holding each other accountable. And one of the guys was like, hey, I'm here with this other group of guys, and I feel like a total island. Like, they're over there talking, and I'm kind of over here not really having a conversation with them. And Tyler and this other guy got back to him and said, look, do you mind if I give you some feedback? And he was like, yeah, of course. And, paraphrasing, of course, but they were basically like, you need to be the captain of the conversation. You right now you're acting like the coach, which is how these guys met you and knew you, that you were giving information and feedback, and they had the choice to, quote unquote, obey or not. And that's not really a way to have a conversation. It's like where you're teaching or preaching at somebody. Instead, you want to be the captain. People lift the captain up. People will follow the captain down to the bottom of the ocean with the ship. Like, people believe in a captain. And I think that those tools and recommendations you just gave are great, because they're teaching you, listeners, they're teaching you guys how to captain the conversations in your family, in your relationships, so that you can have these open moments and these vulnerable moments with people. I think that's great, man. Yeah. There's something I wanted to bring up. I think we all know there is a famous scripture that's misquoted from the Bible regarding money. Oh. In which the verse reads, "For the love of money is the root of all evil, for which some have strayed from their faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through." It's in 1 Timothy 6:10. We know that this was intended to be a word of caution against greed. Mm-hmm. But I find it interesting how now it's a misnomer, right? Where it's simply quoted as money is the root of all evil. I don't know if you've heard that version, but that's the
first
popular.
Version, no, I've heard money is the root of all evil.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's the common misconception about that quote, or that misquote, I should say. So what effect do you think that this misrepresentation, because we have a lot of those in the English language, where something is misquoted and then that misquote becomes more popular than the actual intention of the quote. So what effect do you think this misrepresentation has had on the general population, who don't know the origins of the quote, or moreover, who don't have the benefit of knowing what the quote was originally cautioning against?
Sure. It's a game of telephone. And it's a lot more sensational to say money's the root of all evil. And
yeah.
So people love a more dramatic interpretation of anything and everything.
Yeah, sure.
For example, the news. I don't ever watch the news, because all it is just like a constant
beratement, barrage
of
basically.
Everything.
Yeah, of everything.
Everything is completely blown out of proportion, and they're only feeding me what they think that I should be learning, or
for sure.
What I should think is important, like, Africanized killer bees carrying Zika are coming to a town near you. It's useless, and they're not coming, and it's really not that big of a deal. And I'm sure it's just going to completely blow over.
Sensationalism.
Yeah. So that's a lot of it. Is just trying to sensationalize everything, but more than anything, people always are trying to look for what I call like the bad guy. They're looking for the bad guy in the room. One of my favorite scenes ever is from Scarface. It's Al Pacino towards the end of the movie. I mean, I don't want to ruin it for everybody, but look, if you haven't seen Scarface by now,
I mean, come on,
it's going to be ruined for you. So he's in the restaurant, and he's completely coked up, and he's just like sitting there with like his trophy wife and, you know, his like bodyguard or whatever. And he's like making a big scene. It's just like a super fancy restaurant. He's making a big scene. And they come over and they ask him to leave. And then he's like, oh, don't touch me, don't touch me. He starts like talking to the people in the restaurant who are all staring at him. And paraphrasing, he's basically like, you know, you're looking at me as the bad guy, but you need me. You need me to be the bad guy so that you can point and be like, that's the bad guy.
Very true.
And it's very much with like money. People are pointing like, oh, money is the reason for all of our troubles, whether they, you know, for all of our troubles, for all of our triumphs and everything.
All the evils of the world.
All the evils of the world, it's all money.
Yeah.
You know, one layer beneath that, you could say that, all right, well, it's not money, it's greed. It's greediness and wanting more money. And then, my opinion, greed doesn't exist. There's no such thing as greed.
Really?
There are only incentives. You're either incentivized to do something or you're not incentivized, or you're incentivized like against it. Right. So it's not that people are inherently greedy, it's that you are constantly weighing incentives of whether you should be doing something or not. You know, investment bankers, when they first start out, whatever, 18 hours a day, 20 hours a day, they're incentivized to do that because for them the trade-off is my time as like a 23-year-old is not really as important as it is to be able to make 250 grand
for sure
a year. They're incentivized to do it. Or like a conglomerate that's dumping its oil in the river.
Right.
There's nothing stopping it, and it's cheaper for them to just dump it in the river. So it's not that it's a greedy corporation. It's just that they're incentivized to do it that way, that they're doing it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong either way, which way. But it's, you know, people use greed as kind of like a catch-all, but it's a lot more nuanced than that. You got to think about, you know, why is this company, this person doing what they are doing?
Right.
You know, why is the lion hunting? Because it's incentivized to do so, because it's incentivized against death.
Right.
So it's these kind of things that it's much deeper than people want it to be. They want it to be a simple fix, but it's not.
For sure. And which is why I'm sure they've gone ahead and just simplified that.
Exactly.
You know,
an entire passage just into like one sentence. Like, first of all, that's not even fair. I mean, it's like, oh, how can you do that? But
it makes sense to, you know, like you said, to vilify money.
Yeah.
It had to become a much simpler idea. Like, money is bad.
Yeah.
No, I think that's really interesting because it was like what we were talking about before we started recording, where we were saying that, you know, your fear and my fear of something could be very similar.
Right.
But they are very specific to us. Like, they're very, you know, subjective to our experiences. And I think that that's basically what you're saying with incentives and money, is that, you know, it's going to be your own experience that is driving you towards something or away from something. Yeah. Essentially.
Yeah. It's kind of like fear of clowns. Like, why are you afraid of clowns? Like, did you have a traumatic experience when you were a child, or did you watch it?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
You know, did some clown, like, you know, steal your last piece of birthday cake, or like what, you know, the fear of clowns is a very just easy blanket way of just labeling something quickly.
For sure.
Which is also important. You want to be able to like summarize and estimate, and that's how estimating works, is just kind of like gathering, but there's a lot more layers to it.
Yeah. I completely agree.
And I mean, relating to money in that way, you know, money and like fear of it is just like this kind of blanket idea, but like the nuances underneath is you know, tumultuous past, like too much debt, parents never talked about it, parents got divorced over it. I mean, whatever it may be, everybody has something different, and again, communicating with one another, with your family and friends, and not even that. I mean, just communicating with anybody openly about it is a good exercise, a good mental exercise, you know, to not be afraid to communicate with anybody about it. You know, it's always many more layers than you think it is. And I guarantee you the other person has the same fears that you do, and you'll be less scared or less fearful of it when you realize that person is just as scared as you are.
Love it. It's just, you know, that's what this podcast is all about, helping people to outperform their fears. And you guys, these are the steps right here that you need to take. You know, it starts small. And like anything that we've talked about before, it's all about building up your confidence. When you can build up your confidence, you can truly outperform your fear. So I love that, dude. That's great. Another thing you brought up in our pre-interview call were a list of words that you said a lot of people associate with money, which I wanted to share here. If we can, you want to read down the list?
Sure. Yeah. When you told me about the topic, I just wrote out a bunch of feelings that I felt, that other people have felt. It's just shame, love, fear, security, warmth, comfort, denial, hunger, hope, courage, confidence, and adequacy. And that literally just took me 2 minutes. It was just verbal diarrhea about all the multitude of things that people are always feeling about money and what it brings to them, either in a positive or a negative light. And the beauty is that you can feel all these things all at the same time.
Right.
As soon as you think about money, you can feel several of these emotions all at once. Yeah.
And that's exactly it. What I found is that when I was looking over the list, I was like, these are all emotions.
Yeah.
Is money emotional?
Yeah. I mean, that's all it really is. At the end of the day, it's all based on emotion, because money is just something that we came up with.
Yeah.
It's just, we created it out of thin air. It doesn't mean anything. It's not based off of anything used to be the gold standard, but even that's not based off of anything. Oh, okay, so it's a precious metal, who cares?
Right.
It's, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
And so even if we didn't have money and it was just oh, I've got an abundance of meat, or I have an abundance of coal, this kind of self-worth attached to things that you own rather than who you are is very emotional. And we've forced this onto ourselves to think about money in an emotional way. Money is meant to help you achieve dreams, but people often lose sight of how to actually attain the dream, because they think of a dream as kind of this far off thing.
Right.
Whereas you could easily attain it if you set up a path for yourself.
Right.
And so if you actually did something about it. So oh, one day I'm going to live in a huge mansion and have a bunch of cars, or one day I'm going to solve world hunger.
Right.
One day this, one day that. One day will never ever come for you.
Right.
But if you actually sat down and wrote out a plan to attain these goals, you realize that they're not dreams, but they are actual things that you can achieve. And just thinking of money as just this dream scenario for yourself, you're not doing yourself any favors. It's only making it worse. If you're oh, one day I'm going to win the lottery. Plenty of people say that, but they actually don't play the lottery.
Right.
So lottery could be a strategy for you.
Right.
I think it's a great strategy. It's because it's your expected return is negative, because you're just going to be wasting this dollar
right.
Every week, twice a week, whatever. But at least it's a strategy. At least you've started down the path of at least one strategy. Diversify that with a 401k and a stock portfolio and a decent paying job. But at the same time, you can...
Don't just put all your chips,
$1 a week is not going to break the bank for anybody. And
right, exactly.
So then people are okay, well, one day when I win the lottery and I win $500 million, I'm going to do all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And now I'm pulling a little bit from Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week. It's okay, well, you have all this money, but what do you want to do with it?
Right.
What is it all for?
Right.
It's to attain dreams and wants and needs. So in the 4-hour work week, Tim Ferriss has an exercise, and it's been a while since I read it, but just it's kind of what do you want to be, what do you want to achieve, and then what do you want to have. So it's kind of what do you want to be? I want to be a black belt in Taekwondo, and then you write out the steps for yourself that it will actually take to get there and how much money it would cost to do that. And this is all about thinking of things in total monthly income, so TMI.
Right.
To think about, okay, well, I want to be a black belt in Taekwondo. I got to go to this dojo, and this dojo costs whatever. And sorry if dojo is the wrong name for Taekwondo. My bad.
I don't think you'll get any blowback on that.
And then, so it's going to be whatever, $100 a month. So I have that. So what do I want to, be, and what do I want to have? Okay, well, I want a whatever. I want a BMW. How much is that going to cost? It's going to cost me all in $500 a month with taxes, insurance, and all that stuff together. So it's really showing you this emotional side of you of things that you really want deeply can be attained through money. But you have to remember the whole point is these things that you actually want to be.
Right.
Which is you as an individual. It's not oh, I just want to have $1 million in the bank.
Right.
you could do that, but like, what's that for? Like, what's the purpose of that for you? Like,
right.
Are you, is it just the security of it? Because I guarantee when you get to $1 million, it's not going to be $1 million anymore.
Right.
As you're going to get closer to that number, it's no longer going to be $1 million. So, in Wall Street, money never sleeps. Like, they're asking Josh Brolin's character, he's like, oh, how much is enough? Like, what do you want? How, what is your number? And he's like, more.
Right.
And it's, in a way, it's like a mental sickness, but in other ways, it's very real. Like, there's always something else. So it's, I encourage people to think about what they actually want to do. And this is very different than like how much you spend, because that's all about like the new next thing, whatever.
Right.
But like being a black belt in Taekwondo, in my opinion, would be much more fulfilling than just getting the newest, hottest Mercedes out there. So thinking about your dreams in those kind of terms is better. It's healthier.
Eric Thomas has this saying where he says, you grind for the goal, I grind for the grind.
Oh yeah,
and
that's
I think that I love it, and I think that's a good way of thinking about it. It's like if you're just making money or trying to attain something for a goal, then it could be a very short-sighted, short-lived, not so sustainable, methodology, as opposed to if I just change my lifestyle, or if I just change the way I go about achieving things on a daily basis, it could be much more productive, much more sustainable. I started drinking a gallon, like I wanted to start simple a couple months ago. I think last time we saw each other, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start drinking more water. But if I think about this as like a diet, this is why I think diets fail, because people think too far ahead about how much effort it's going to be compounded over months and years. And they're like, there's no way I can sustain that.
Yeah.
But so my approach was like, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to start drinking water, and I'm going to see if I can crush a gallon. And I didn't, but at least I got 3/4 of the way there. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to keep drinking this until it's gone. And then when this is gone, I'll buy another one, and then that'll be my new challenge. And it was tremendous, dude. Like it lasted a good couple months, and summer came and I started traveling more, and things got out of whack, routine wise. But at least I was able to prove that theory right. Whereas like if I need to do something different, start small. But like you said with the lotto thing, just start. Like don't wait for a perfect moment or strategy or anything. It'll never come. Like you said, your one day will always just be a one day. If that's the way you think about it.
Were you peeing a lot?
I wasn't.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I wasn't peeing a lot.
That's
like
great.
I wasn't expelling.
That means that you're actually severely dehydrated, because like drinking a straight up gallon with nothing else added.
Yeah.
If you're not peeing a lot, first of all, it means like you're really dehydrated.
I knew it too, because I was lethargic. My lips were always dry. My skin. I'm a dry person anyways, but my skin was horrible.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you bring that up, because we'll be having Igor on again, talking health one day.
Oh man, that's
that's your passion.
That's what I'm actually good at. Finance stuff, like it's good, but like what I really love is all things health.
And I realized this yesterday. I was like, I have him talking about finance.
Yeah.
I really need him on here talking about health. So we'll talk about that. We'll figure that out. But so let's keep going. I wanted to do something fun. I want to do a little true or false type thing, like all these emotions that you listed out, that people associate with money. I think that they lead directly to the myths that we have in our culture about money. So let's do a little true or false myth busting.
I love binary, black and white. That's my favorite. It's the easiest answer.
But I'm also I'm a little stickler. I'm gonna ask for a short essay answer as well.
Of course.
So yeah, here we go. Money myths that need to be immediately debunked. Here we go. Maybe I'll add a little dramatic background music to this. So if we can go ahead and cue dramatic music now. Okay, here we go. Thinking of money emotionally. True or false?
False. So money should be only thought of logically. So your dreams should be emotional, but the money that it's going to take to attain those dreams, that should be clean mathematical logic only.
Got it. Number 2, money is a private matter. True or false?
false. This stems back to what we were talking about. The more you think of it as your genitalia, the less likely you are to share it with the world.
Right.
You know, you need to have those conversations, because without them, you will not get the knowledge that you need to succeed, and neither will your close family or friends. Like, there won't be a sharing of knowledge, and information will die eventually. Like, if nobody passed on how to, you know, properly cook the deer after we've caught it, we never would have made it out of the caves. You know?
Number 3. My money defines my self-worth and importance.
Definitely false. Definitely false. You know, it's like I was saying, it's easy. It's an easy yardstick, but it's not the best yardstick. It's just the easiest option, but it's not the best option at all. I was reading this book, Driver. So it's about this guy, Alex Roy, who is setting the record from New York to LA.
Okay.
And so, so like, for the uninitiated, it's like the land record. So he gets himself a 2002 M5, which is already tugging at the heartstrings, one of my favorite cars ever built. In a 2002 M5, him and a co-pilot, they cut across the United States, and I think it was like 32 hours or something.
Wow.
They set the record to get across. The record has since fallen. This was like early 2000s, I think they set the record. The record has fallen, but the story is amazing. It's a super easy read, especially if you love cars. Like, this will really be great. But in there, so he needs a co-pilot for himself. And so he finds this guy who's a club racer. And a club racer is a guy that the race is like amateur. But, you know, amateur is the wrong way to put it, because this guy is basically one of the best drivers that you'll ever meet. Guys that race in amateur races are incredible racers. So He's like, you know, I need a co-pilot. It's 32 hours. And so this guy agrees, and he's like, all right, before we set out on this journey, which could potentially just kill us or land us in jail, best case scenario, why do you want to do this? Like, I need to know your reason. And this guy, and I'll never forget it, and I never even thought of it this way, this guy said, I want something that money can't buy.
Wow.
And that, like, when I read that line, it literally gave me chills.
Wow.
Because I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant.
Right.
That is brilliant. And then I started thinking about my own life. What do I do that money can't buy?
Right.
And so much of my self-worth is based around my athletic ability and how, like, fast I am, how strong I am, how good my engine is, like, all these things. Like, that's how I really measure my self-worth, amongst other things. But when he said that, I was like, oh my God, like, that's exactly it. Like, you can't buy first place in swimming.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, you can't buy a great physique. You know, you can't buy health.
Right.
Like, Western medicine tries to let you think that you can buy health, but you can't really.
Right.
Like, taking a pill is not the same as just being preventative. And so that's what really did it for me. Is just like, you know, you're not defined by it. You're defined by the things that you have earned.
Right.
It cost me money to go to the pool, but what I earned in that pool is who I am.
For sure. Can't be bought. Number, 4? I shouldn't offend people with how much I make. True or false? This one might be a little...
So this one's tricky. The wording on it is
tricky.
Right. So I'm going to say false for a few reasons. One, you shouldn't be afraid to offend people. You know, constantly walking around that you're going to offend somebody, nobody's ever going to achieve anything. You're never going to take any risks, and society will just cease to grow and probably even cease to exist if all we do is we're always afraid. It's a very PC society nowadays, particularly in America.
Right.
We're all just, you know, walking on eggshells all the time. I think that's wrong. That prevents communication, and it prevents, you know, growth. At the same time, like, I should not offend. Yeah, you shouldn't go around being a douchebag all the time.
Right, exactly.
But don't think that what you make is the thing that's going to be offending people. So just think of it in that light instead of just simply like, oh, if I tell this guy how much money I make, it'll offend him, or maybe I'll be offended. And, you know, brings us back to, like, fear of being, like, the loser or whatever. But that openness is what, if the other person that you're speaking to is somebody that you care about, that openness will actually bring you together. You're not going to say in a douchey way like, oh, you only made $100,000 last year, I made 150, like GFY.
Right.
But, having a dialogue about it and be like, oh, okay, well, my portfolio earned 10%, and you told me that yours only earned 6%. Like, how are you thinking about it? Like, what's constituting your portfolio? Here's what's constituting mine. Like, here's how I think about it. Like, I have these dividend-paying stocks. I got these ETFs and that kind of thing. So it's, don't be afraid to offend.
I like it. Number 5, debt is bad.
Oh yeah, this is the biggest false of all.
Listen up. Debt is bad is false. Why is that?
So this is one of the biggest misconceptions. To kind of summarize, debt makes the world go round. Debt is the reason why you are able to buy anything. Debt is the reason why you are able to literally eat and feed yourself. We're brought up, again, socially and incorrectly. Like, parents will bring up their kids incorrectly saying like, oh, never have any debt. I'm not promoting you going into credit card debt, which is like 28% or whatever number it's at now, which is, first of all, like complete robbery. I mean, just the fact that credit card company is like 28% is just robbery. But what's even worse is the people that have revolving credit card debt. So if you have more than a zero balance on every credit card, if you can't pay off your credit card every month, then do not use it. Gotcha. 28% is insane. Yeah. Like, that number is just, it's ludicrous.
You're talking interest rates, right?
Interest rate, yeah. So for those of you that don't understand it, so if you carry a balance, meaning like, all right, I spent $1,000 on my credit card, the bill comes due, and I only pay $500, and $500 of it rolls forward, they're going to charge you 28% annualized. So you take 20%, you divide that by 12, and that's how much they charged you for that month. That's insane. You are spending beyond your means, and that's completely incorrect, and you should not be doing that. The debt that I'm talking about is a mortgage, for example. So mortgage rates are historically low. Now's a good time to take out a mortgage only if you can afford the payments. But think of it this way. Think of interest rates this way. If you can take out money at 3% and then invest that money into something that's going to generate 5%, you are net, making the math easy, you're net 2%. Right. That is a smart investment. Right. So that debt is helping you to build your finances and helping you to build your assets. Right. So in many ways, that's housing, especially in California. So typically, you're going to buy a house, right? And your interest rate, let's just say, is 4%. Housing market, who knows what it'll do going forward, but historically, it'll return 6 or 7%. Right. So you spend 4% over the course of a 30-year mortgage. You spend 4%, and then after 30 years, you've made 7% per year. So you've been netting 3%. And so in that sense, debt is good. Got you. Debt's bad when you're spending beyond your means, and if you can only afford a $500,000 house, but you're trying to buy a $2 million house. That's one of the many reasons that we got into the financial collapse to begin with. People thought they could afford a lot more house than they could. It was exasperated by, predatory lending and the banks and the government and the people. I want to set the record straight. Everybody was at fault for 2008. Yeah. It wasn't just the government. It wasn't just the banks. It wasn't just the people. It was everybody working in this like huge, clockwork of shit where they all forced themselves and incentivized themselves to take out all this debt.
And I remember everybody kind of like being in a vacuum or like this, I don't know, just be kind of oblivious. It didn't seem like a shock when the crash happened. Yeah. Like it kind of seemed like we were just avoiding a problem that was growing bigger and bigger but now that's really interesting.
It's just tulip mania over and over. Yeah. Wikipedia tulip mania, but it's like tulip bulbs the price of tulip bulbs in a very short amount of time shot up by thousands of %. And so people were buying, and then one day somebody's like, wait, these are worthless. Yeah. And then boom, it came crashing down. And that's how market crashes work.
That was in the 1700s?
Yeah, one of those.
Something like that? Yeah, I remember learning about that in my Western European history class. And And actually, my teacher was obsessed with the tulip crash.
Yeah.
That was our longest unit that she taught, and it ended up being the most interesting because it was just really cool that tulips, like you were saying, it could have been meat, it could have been something else, but like that was the major standard for currency.
Yeah.
Back then. So, all right, number 6. I think this is our last one. It doesn't really matter what you have, it's what you spend. You kind of touched on this before. It doesn't really matter what you have, it's what you spend. True or false? Let me put it this way.
No,
if this is my mentality,
that's obviously false.
Yeah.
Is it true in the sense of American society thinks that way? Yes, that's true.
Right.
So if it was a multiple choice test and I'm trying to get an A, then it's true. But it should be false.
Yeah.
It's a very sick way of looking at your life and what you've achieved up until this point. Mm-hmm. People, and another reason why, people don't communicate about it is because some people value money above relationships. And so some people value how much they have in the bank over their wife or over their husband. And so that just breeds all kind of animosity because people can feel it. It's very difficult to hide your true emotions. And so
for sure.
There are relationships where the spouse, and I bring up spouses a lot, but it could be like people care more about money than they do about their own kids. I mean, that happens all the time, but it's people feel that, and so that breeds animosity and
it's one of the closer relationships that we have in adult life. So I think like spouse or partner or whatever. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, so that's it generates a lot of problems for a lot of people, and they miss out on what's truly important in life, which is the relationships, the communication, the love, and all these things. And they substitute love of money for the love of your family.
Right.
So
right, very true. I think at this point I wanted to bring up a song. If you guys haven't heard it yet, Lil Dicky's song "Save Dat Money," DAT money. It's a great song because like you said over the phone earlier when we were talking that money and the whole money culture, it's a construct, and particularly in American culture, it's exemplified. Well, I think having traveled a little bit, I know that American culture kind of sets the standard on the world, platform. So it's kind of world culture at this point. But it's money and the whole idea of it doesn't really matter what you have, it's what you spend is exemplified by 3 genres of people who are idolized most. Public figures, like eccentric billionaires, Kardashian. I would call the Kardashians public figures before celebrities, probably. Rappers, and then professional athletes. So the song "Save That Money" is hilarious simply for the fact that you have a professional rapper rapping about saving money and telling that the whole culture has it wrong, that you guys are bragging about, what you don't have, building, accumulating debt, trying to show off this flashy lifestyle, when instead you really should be putting, I think he said at one point, like 401k rolling over bands, and it's just a hilarious song. But you guys check that out. All right, Igor, what are the top 3 things you want people to know about money to help them better understand it and thereby be less fearful of it, and what it can actually do to and for their lives?
So the number one thing, and it's a way to think about it, but it's also what to do, is track your expenses. So if anybody who wants to just begin on a path to help themselves in any way, they need to understand knowledge is power. And so having the knowledge will enable you much more than you think it will. So if your listeners, if somebody has never tracked their expenses, this will be one of the most eye-opening things you have done in a long time. So literally sit down, and you're going to, in 2 phases. One, you're going to write out all the expenses that you think you have. So just go through everything, and you can categorize it however you want, but just get everything down, and get it down to like the last dollar. So try to round down to dollars. Leave out the cents. and try to write down everything that you think you're spending, right? So that's exercise. That's the first step of the exercise. Second step of the exercise is you're actually going to track. So on your smartphone, just have an app, and you're going to write down everything that you spend every single day. Every single dollar on everything. All the bills, all the auto bill pays that you have at the end of the month, your credit card statement, all these things, you're going to write everything down. I guarantee you're going to miss, I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but there's going to be a fat chunk that you missed,
right,
that you think you're spending.
Right.
So this is step number one. When you have that number of your monthly expenses, and do this for like a quarter, because some things only come up quarterly.
Right.
Like you're paying your property taxes only every 6 months usually. So do it for a quarter, do it for 3 months, but at the very minimum a month, and that usually catches almost all your expenses. And you can tweak them, add stuff later as you go through it. But this is going to give you the knowledge necessary to make real changes, and you're going to look at it and be like, wow, that's how much I spent on clothing? Like, wow, that's insane. Like, why would I spend that much money? Or like, that's how much I spent on eating out?
Right.
Like, if I just cook for myself, I could cut that in, I can cut that in half, or I can cut that by like 2/3 or something.
Right.
And you're like, well, there's an extra couple $100 for me at the end of the day to either, save for something or do whatever else I want with it. So that's step one is that. And, a lot of the time people fool themselves.
Right.
Into thinking that they're not spending that much. So every time like you get on like Nike.com and you just go on like a huge spending binge,
right,
you think that that's rare. But if you actually tracked it, you'll see that that's a lot less rare than you thought it was.
Right.
Your Amazon spending habits, that instant gratification, is coming around way more often than you think.
Yep.
And that's all psychological. It's all emotional. It's very much like people's sugar addictions.
Right.
Like, majority of America has a unaddressed sugar addiction, and they fool themselves into thinking that they don't have a problem.
Right.
Like, oh, I can stop anytime I want, but you can't. People are riding this constant wave of like ups and downs and ups and downs. You wake up in the morning and you're hungry and you reach for like bread or some kind of like processed carbohydrate that gives you an instant kick, an instant high. And then when you come crashing off that high after like an hour and a half, you're going to need another kick. So you go for like a coffee break, grab a quick donut or a croissant, you're riding the high again, and then you start crashing again, and then you need some more bread. You get like a sandwich with some like sauce on it, which has plenty of sugar in it to begin with, another high, another crash, and it's just all day long. And so people don't realize how often they're doing that. Or even better, like this, I love this line. It's like, that's healthy, right? Like, it's like some guy goes and picks up some food and is almost justifying it to himself. Like somebody, whatever, orders pizza for the office. Right. But it's like a veggie pizza. It's got vegetables.
Oh, it's veggie pizza. That's healthy, right?
Right. And so he's like trying to convince himself verbally. It's like your own psychological cue. You're like telling yourself like, hey, it's healthy, and you're also trying to get less judgment from the people around. You're like, oh, this is healthy, right?
Right.
And then one better than that is like, oh, I've earned this donut.
Right. Like we treat the bad things in life. Yeah. And I just use the word. We use it as a treat.
Yeah.
I've said it many times. I am guilty of the sugar addiction. I know that. It's something I've struggled with. I know. You were sitting here gesturing at the Gatorade. I'm drinking.
You're chugging at the Gatorade, bro.
But yeah, I've used that in the past. Like, I've used those words like, oh, I've been good. I deserve a treat. And it's like, it hit me one day when I was like, I'm saying that I need to treat myself with something that's bad for me. Like, these are the words, and this is why I love what we're talking about, what we do. I love this podcast because it all boils down to the rhetoric that we use, the semantics of our everyday life. And I think that too many people don't understand that it's the words that we use that screw us over the most, usually, and leads to these mentalities that will allow us to get into these situations. So, no, that's great. So that's the first thing is track your expenses. Yeah. What were the other two?
The second one is debt. And what we were talking about debt, that just having just a blanket thought, which again, like we were saying earlier, is easy to just have like one blanket idea that debt is bad.
Yeah.
So it's incorrect to think that way. Certain debt is bad, certain debt is good. And distinction between the two is important. So debt that is low interest rate. So if you typically on a house, it's usually some of the lowest debt that you can get. So it's 4%. That's one thing. Whereas credit card revolving debt, 28%, that's insane. And there's a whole spectrum in between. You know, you can take out a business loan, might cost you 10%, but you think that your business is going to give you ROI, return on investment of like 50%.
Right.
So you're winning that 40. So that's something like that. You just have to always weigh what you're going to be using the debt for.
Got you.
So just always remember that, and you know, use debt to build up assets in a smart way. And so,
how could people go about doing that? Like short examples.
So, for example, you have let's just say you have a house and you've been paying it off for a while, so you built up some equity, or the market's been going up, and so the house has appreciated, so you have equity in the house. You can take out a loan against the equity. And usually that's going to be like maybe prime plus 1, prime plus 1.5. And what that is prime rate, which is currently like 3.5%. That's kind of like what prime rate is, what you would give like the best borrower. They're considered prime borrowers.
Gotcha.
It's prime plus 1, meaning prime plus 1%. Because home equity line of credit, a HELOC, is a little bit riskier. They're going to charge you a little bit more. So it's all like commensurate with risk and reward. So it's roughly 4.5%, right? If you have an investment that you know or predict will give you 7%, 8%, things like that, then that would be a good move. You take out money at 4.5, you make 8.5, you capture 3.5 for yourself. That's the idea. That's how you build that up.
Okay.
And then kind of off the back, like kind of combining 1 and 2, just some quick to-dos for people. If you're just trying to get your finances in order, you track the finances, get all that in line. Now you want to look at your debt and rank it in terms of what's the most expensive debt. Most expensive is almost always going to be credit card debt.
For sure.
And so before you make any investments, before you make any other changes and taking out more debt, things like that, look at what your revolving debt is, if you have any, and then wipe that down as far as you can. Look at what you're spending, start spending less, use some of that money to pay down your really high revolving debt as fast as possible. And then after that, you need to build up a reserve of cash. So in case something happens, you lose your job, anything happens, the safest thing is to have 6 months of expenses. So those expenses that you did, take that number, multiply by 6, and that should just sit in a savings account untouched. And then once that's done, now you start thinking about, does your company offer a 401k? Max that puppy out. Do you have an IRA, investment retirement account? Max that puppy out. And then after that, you can start thinking about bigger investments, maybe stock portfolios, bonds, that kind of thing.
Wow.
So.
And that was 2 and 3, or is that?
No, that's kind of like 1 and 2 together. And then number
together.
3, it's just like a self-serving thing. So my favorite movie is Fight Club.
Okay.
And the famous line from that, Tyler Durden, but it's really Chuck Palahniuk who's like the author. And I wrote this down so I wouldn't butcher it. You are not your job. You're not how much money you have in the bank. You are not the car you drive. You're not the contents of your wallet. So that's the most important thing to remember, is that you're not made up of these possessions that are completely made up.
Yeah.
You know, don't let society tell you what's important. Figure out what's important for yourself. Your love for your mother, your father is much more important than society telling you about the new Maserati, or Kim Kardashian telling you about her new makeup line that came out. None of that matters.
Which he knew about. Just want to say that.
it's what's the sister's name?
Kylie.
So there's all these
Kylie and Kim.
She's like almost a billionaire or whatever.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's impressive.
You know, on the one hand, I'm like, oh God. And on the other hand, I'm like, you created something out of absolutely nothing.
Exactly. You can't knock it.
Well played.
Right, exactly.
Well played.
But I also knew about it. So there's that. I am unashamed. I watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians with my wife quite regularly. But anyways, no, those are great. I think those are 3 great solid takeaways for people listening to start incorporating in their life. I know I'm sitting here, I'm kind of giving you this blank deep stare, because I'm also thinking about my finances and how I need to, start incorporating that, especially with the brand growing. I'm branching out and, formalizing the business and stuff like that. And so that's a whole nother degree of financial thoughts and planning and stuff. So it'd be nice to get my house in order before I start thinking about, moving forward with growing the business even more. But, yeah, that's great. Yeah. I want to thank you for being on the show, but, I wanted to say this really quick. You and my wife have the same birthday. Yeah. And, of course, Sheen being the one who introduced us. But one thing I can say about you both is that try as you might to sometimes, keep people in situations at an arm's length. You both have a tremendous heart, and you share your knowledge with people in such a way that their lives will only benefit from that. But you guys have this fervorance for sharing your knowledge just to help the people that you care about, in your lives. Absolutely. And sometimes even I've noticed sometimes strangers, people that you've met through us at different functions or whatever, like you'll share your heart and your passion just to see and hope that their lives will benefit from some way. So I wanted to acknowledge you for that, and thank you for taking your time out to share, your knowledge with hundreds of, perfect strangers today. And, for, as much as you don't think that, it's that big of a deal, I know it is to a lot of people listening. I know it's opened up some eyes and, probably shed some light on some stuff that they've tried to ignore in their own lives. So thanks, man.
This is a real pleasure. I appreciate you having me on, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, take it easy. And, until next time.
Yep.
I hope you were paying attention. I want to thank my brother Igor Litvak for such an awesome time together and for sharing so much valuable information with us today. Remember, wherever you're listening, be sure to follow us and have your notifications turned on to be notified the moment a new episode drops. If you're listening on iTunes, please rate the show and leave us a review. It's my vision to touch the lives of the masses and add value to the world. And every like, rating, and review only helps me to further realize that vision. Remember, guys, closed mouths don't get fed. If you don't understand something, ask questions and seek understanding, because if we seek to understand more, we can learn to fear less. Remember, you can find me almost anywhere online. Coach Lane on Instagram, that's where I hang out the most. Thanks again for joining us today. Remember, whatever it is, go out there and get after it. I'm Coach Lane. I'll catch you on the flip.